All right, so great to be joined by Dave Tucciarone and Keilana. I want to welcome both of them and thank them for their time and energy that they're giving us at this panel of So You Want to Be a Singer Producer. Did I say that right? No. So You Want to Be a Songwriter Producer. That's the one. And so first I'm going to just start with a little bio for each of them. Keilana is an award-winning Hawaiian Filipino R&B soul musician who's quickly gaining fame and worldwide recognition. Her silky vocals and live looping skills have gained her critical acclaim across social media platforms, bridging the gap between Hawaii and mainstream music. Keilana was named Hōkū Hanohano Award 2021 Most Promising Artist and R&B Album of the Year. Her debut album, I Am, charted at #2 on the iTunes R&B charts. That's amazing. Her music has been featured on platforms including Netflix, MTV, VH1, and Disney. Dave Tucciarone is a 2-time Grammy Award-winning producer engineer, as well as a 15-time Hōkū Hanohano Award winner. In over 35 years of professional activity, he's recorded over 300 albums and thousands of songs, and he continues to produce a wide variety of music styles in Honolulu, including Hawaiian music, local reggae island music, folk, alternative, jazz, pop, and country. So I want to welcome you both. And, you know, this is, I'm excited about this because, you know, we have a lot of tools now that were not available like 10, 20, 30 years ago. And there's so much activity that we don't know about. But that activity, those young up and coming songwriters and producers are finding their own way. So both of you in this conversation, I feel like this is a way to help them and to hear a story. And so I want to start off with just, you know, the question of when did you realize that there was actually a job that had a name songwriter or producer? And which of those do you most closely identify with in your current work? Who wants to go first?
Keilana.
All right, I'll go first. I would say I realized that first off, I'm sure that we've all felt this way, or at least I can attest to it. When I was growing up, I really, really just had an affixation to music, being able to play the piano. Piano was my first instrument, and singing and playing the guitar came naturally to me. But I was under this impression and this false narrative that being a musician meant it was kind of like a dead-end path. And I really, really loved what I did, though. I loved being able to study, just the feeling that music gave me, the inspiration, just everything encompassing it was just so freeing to me. And I felt very passionate about really taking the time to understand and break that narrative of, you know, you can't be successful in Hawaii or even in general through music. And so I made it my life's work for the last 10 years to study and understand and try and see, like, is it really true or is it not? And in these 10 years, I've realized it's definitely not true. Music is necessary in today, in, you know, in everyday life as humans. And there are so many avenues that I think we can brush up and talk about today, or just even just shed light on. And I think for me, that aha moment was when I finally just got over that fear of, like, you know, I'm going to tell people I'm a musician. And even if that stigma is there, I'm going to just keep pushing and figuring out and taking opportunities to realize that there are many, many pathways. You could be a teacher, you could be an educator, you could be a performing musician, you could be a songwriter, you could be a producer, you can be an engineer, live sound engineer, you could be a technician. Like, there's just so many avenues of songwriting, of production, of performing, of artistry. And I am just very passionate about sharing that with all of Hawaii and all of you watching this. So really, really grateful to be here today.
Thanks, Keilana. And the world, by the way, right? The world.
And the world, yes.
The world.
Dave.
I was a musician first, and when I got the bug, it was all over. I just loved music. I couldn't get enough. I wanted to learn how to play everything. I started on bass, and I learned how to play the guitar. Then I was in the piano practice room in high school, and I was taking organ lessons. And I remember going with my organ teacher and telling my mother that when I think I was about 15 or 16, that, Mom, I'm going to go into music. And she cried, but they weren't tears of joy. So, but that wasn't going to deter me. And so I was singing in choir in 7th grade and sang all through high school. And I didn't know that I was learning all of these things and how they would apply to what I was going to be doing later, which is working with people and being able to have discussions with them about music, about their instrument, about singing, about harmony and things like that, because all of this stuff was part of my education. At the same time, I was interested in songwriting, and me and my friends, we wrote some songs. They weren't very good, but we just getting into the process and then analyzing hit songs of the day and listening to what these people did and lyrics and music, and I was interested in that, but I was more interested in the musical part and actually the recording part. I had a very primitive kind of a tape machine, and me and 2 other guys played. We played guitars and we sang harmony. So what we would do is sing the song and play the song. Then I would I put the headphones on and listen to the first track and guide them, and we would do exactly the same thing again. And that's all we had was 2 tracks, but we'd sit back and listen to those 2 tracks, the 6 of us, and go, yeah. And so I knew that recording was something that I wanted to do and pursue. And I had some different opportunities to get into more of a professional. I was doing demos with people, and I had 8-track recorder because that technology became available. The technology was changing fast. And then I opened a studio here in Honolulu, and I had a 16-track recorder, and I had a kind of a board, a little bigger board, and I was slowly growing into the technology. But having 16 tracks and being able to record people, the possibilities then increased dramatically as far as how many things you could have going on and additional harmonies and instruments. And while I'm doing that, I'm learning as an engineer how to put all this together, and then as a producer, how to do all that. And I wanted to talk about the difference between an engineer and a producer, which is a very big difference, actually. An engineer is the guy who presses the buttons, or gal, and sets up the microphones and plugs in the patch bay and whatever, and knows how to run the equipment and understands what a compressor does and so forth and so on. A producer doesn't need to know any of that, none. The producer is the guy who works on the creative aspect of the artist's music and works with them in sometimes a very personal way, actually always a very personal way when you're dealing with someone's expression of their music, which is their soul, and helping them to get this idea that started in their brain as just like a little light impulse, and which is basically an emotion. And the emotion came out somehow through their hands onto an instrument, and then through their mouth in the form of syllables and words. And everything then that was created from that little light spark in the brain contributed to that emotion that you wanted people to hear, whether it was happy or sad or angry or hopeful or, you know, faith or whatever it might be. All of those things, all of those emotions were channeled into that production. And so my job as a producer, I would venture to say, is to help people get to the end of that expression of that emotion and feeling, so people can understand what it is that they felt and what they're trying to say. And I would say that probably the most successful forms of that are probably the best songs that we've known and heard, because they touch us almost like personally, like it was something that was written for us, but it gets to inside to our emotion, you know. So I've spent a lifetime studying that and trying to figure out what kind of chord can I play here that's going to accentuate that. What can I change the line that the singer is singing to make that a little more expressive, to bring out that emotion? What other instruments can I add or even take away? Maybe there's too many things going on that are not allowing for that emotion to peer through the music so people can get to it and understand it better. So, you know, I mean, I can talk about this for another 5 days, but so essentially that for me is the essence of producing, is getting to the essence of the song, of the artist's expression, of their creation, of their emotion. And the engineering side is the technical side of knowing software, knowing eventually I had a 24-track machine with a 44-channel board, and it was like 8 feet long, and understanding all of that. But what evolved though from that, as the technology evolved, was the engineer/producer.
Yeah.
Where you're flipping hats, you know, faster than you can think, because you are an engineer and you don't need to interface with another person. You can do it yourself. But it requires a lot of training to do that, though, because if you don't know your equipment well enough, you're going to get bogged down. It's like, well, geez, how do I do that? You're going to be looking at the, you know, help manuals online, and your whole creative thought and process is done.
Out the door.
Gone. It's gone. So you have to know what's in your toolbox and how to use that effectively as the tool that it is. You know, and just say, oh, I have this great idea, and you run over to your computer and you turn it on, and then you start recording, and it's all automatic, and then you get to expressing your idea. So yeah, engineer/producer is what's has evolved, I would say, at least for the last 20 or 30 years. Yeah, especially now though.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the idea that you started as a musician and a songwriter, and you had a need to produce, and that's sort of your pathway. That was your pathway.
Can I just say one more thing about that? You know, I opened a studio,
Please.
professional studio, in 1986, and I worked with many different clients. Capenna was my first group I recorded, and I did Monopoly Company, you know, Drop Baby Drop, and I was getting some really good musicians and groups coming in. But it took me about 4 or 5 years of doing that to be able to say that I'm a producer now. You know, I didn't start out in this studio with all this equipment, you know, and saying that, oh, just because I have this stuff, I'm a producer. I felt as though I had to learn and what it is to be a producer, and then to say then to anyone that's coming in to my studio, I can produce you if you want me to, because a lot of people, they want to produce themselves, and or other people, they don't even know that they need a producer, right? But in order for me to confidently say that, I had to feel as though I had enough knowledge about what it was in order to say that to people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, Keilana, your pathway as a songwriter, and also someone who, I mean, you graduated from the Mele program after you graduated from UH Manoa Music Department.
And kind of touching upon that was exactly what he said, which was, I want to make sure that I have the tools in the toolbox necessary for me to be able to say that I am a songwriter, or I am I can do music production, or, and I think for me, my pathway was very interesting because I was a music enthusiast. It took me a while to actually want to be a performer because I was kind of soft-spoken growing up. I wasn't someone that wanted to be in front of everyone on a stage, but I really, really loved music. And eventually, like you said, Dave, having opportunities to just be out there, get more acclimated to it, made me feel more comfortable being on a stage. And so actually, when I started playing and performing music and doing gigs, I was doing a lot of cover music. And a lot of people would tell me, you should write your own music. And it took me years to finally be willing to do so, because I love writing. Writing is a therapeutic thing that I do on the side outside of music for myself. And I've always had that, and melding the two together, my musicianship and my writing, was something that was too sacred for me to kind of do for a really long time. But again, like you were saying, just kind of putting your foot in the door and just trying it out. Eventually I got more comfortable with my writing, and I started to see that grow. And now I like you were saying, it took you a while to be able to say I am a producer. It took me at least 4 years as well to say I am a songwriter. Mm-hmm. And one really great thing though about not just being a songwriter, but being someone that tries to understand the aspects of recording and music production, it really helps you to understand the lingo, the language, when talking to a producer or an engineer, because sometimes, they can only say as much as you're able to communicate with them. And as a songwriter, I feel like it's like one thing that you can do is try and learn the lingo, at least try and get yourself, your feet wet, so that you have more words in your dictionary, so that when you're talking to an engineer or a producer, you're able to say, oh, hey, I want, certain things. We don't have to get into specifics right now, but right. Yeah, so that was something very, very important for me.
Music is its own language, it's like a foreign language, really. It's like any other French or Italian, it's its own language. And the more you can speak that language, yes, the better you can communicate with other people who speak the same language and get to what it is you want to get to right away, I will say this about songwriting too. I read Keith Richards' book from the Rolling Stones, and it was a really good book. And he talked about songwriting. So when the Stones were just coming out, the Beatles were out already, and the Who, and all these other groups, and there was a huge competition to write songs as good as like the Beatles are writing. It's like, don't even bother if you can't. So he said him and Mick sat down, and Mick Jagger, and he said it took him 9 months to write the first song that they thought was playable, or that they could go and record in the studio and they wouldn't feel bad about, because they said they wrote so much garbage, but it took them 9 months to do that, and that's one little anecdotal story about songwriting. I have my own. Well, I had a record deal in back in the 80s to go to London and record, and somebody heard my songs, so I was assigned a producer. This dude was from Scotland, but he's worked in London studios and LA, and all these LA guys. So he comes in to see me, and he says, so we sit down and listen to the first song, and he goes, I'm not even going to try to do his Scottish accent. He says, I like this bit, and I like this bit, but I'm not crazy about the part in the middle. And this is good for songwriters. You need to know this, okay? And I was thinking, what? What are you talking about? I have a record deal, right? And so then we go on to the next song. And he kind of does the same thing. He listens to this part and he goes, yeah, I like this part a lot. This part, not so much. But then this part, yeah, over here is really good. And I'm getting like indignant, because I'm the artist, I'm the songwriter, I'm the guy with the record deal. And so we did this for the rest of the songs. And after he left, and after I got over my indignation, I thought about it, and you know what? He was 1,000% right, because this part I know was good, and this part was good, but this part was just a way to get from here to here. And I didn't feel the same way about this part and this part, but maybe I was thinking nobody else would notice either. Well, that's not the way it works in songwriting. So I went in and I worked on those parts that he said needed to be better. And I tell you what, it damn near killed me. That was the 1% that I was missing. The blood, sweat, and tears. It's like, how can I possibly come up with something that's gonna be as good as this other stuff? And it really did kill me, but I did. And eventually, and I had to really work it. And he came back in and he goes, yeah, that's good.
That's good.
So, but that's the hard part about songwriting, I think, is you have to be perfectly honest with yourself. Because if you're not, then you're not going to get over on other people when they hear your stuff. They're going to not know technically what's wrong with it, but they're not going to feel the same way about this part and this part, or this song and that song. And that's one of the things that you have to do as a songwriter. Pure honesty. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, one of the, just widening that scope a little bit about collaboration, because what you're describing is highly collaborative. And in a collaboration, what happens if you don't check your ego at the door?
Oh man, the song won't get done. The song won't get done. And there's just a huge balance.
There's no ego, in songwriting or producing. It's like, people, leave your ego at the door. I always say, if you have to tell me how good you are, then you ain't that good.
Thank you. Exactly.
That doesn't belong in the creative process of collaboration or in production, because people, and that's the thing about producing too, is you have to gain the trust of people, and they need to know that you have their best interest in mind, and you're both working together towards the same goal. If you're not on that same page, then nothing good is going to happen, right? But gaining that trust and knowing that it's that's where you're heading, and that you're going to do that together is paramount to having a good relationship with someone as a producer. And what that also means is that you may say stuff to people, and you have to become a diplomat too. As a producer, you really have to become a diplomat. How do you say stuff to people that tells them what they're doing is not that good without crushing their ego? Well, some people, it's going to crush their ego anyway, no matter how gently you try to handle it. But if they trust in you and they understand what it is you're saying, and they'll go home, for instance, I get a lot of guys come in and they do pawnee, they do solos, and they come in and they're inside jamming, nothing happening, nothing. They come out, I tell them, look, be your own best fan, go home for a half an hour and come up with a solo that you'd like to hear, that you would say, hey, I wish I played that, and come back in and put it down in like 10 minutes. And then they do, and they come back and they put it down, and I said, see? And it can be that easy, but the main part is put your ego away. Yeah. And do your best. There's no room for that in either producing or songwriting or collaboration, especially.
Yeah. It does happen a lot, especially in collaborative writing. And you have to, like you said, being a diplomat and just finding ways to let people down gently. But I think even as an artist or a songwriter in a room, you have to remember that the goal is to come up with that piece of art. And it's not about who was able to contribute the most or who, are having the last word in there. It's really just about the music. And I think that's something that we need to remember and remind ourselves all the time when working with people. And relationships are so integral to the success in of the song or the music that you make.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder, how do you, relationships are about respect, right? Everybody wants to feel respected. How do you ensure that in your work?
I think it's a balance of being able to uphold yourself and be able to walk into a room with confidence, but confidence versus cockiness, not walking into a room thinking, okay, I need to prove to everyone that I am the best in the room. I think when you're able to just have a very dignified presence in a room and have that mindset of, okay, I want to create the best song, not for my own benefit, but just for everyone and for all of us and our listeners. And it's being very, very intentional about that. But then also being able to take criticism, like Dave was saying, you have to be able to, when someone says, hey, I don't think that's the right word for that, or that kind of sucked. And I think there's a real level of humility and just professionalism to someone that can take criticism, and knowing that, especially when you're working with, like for me, if I were to be working with Dave and he were to tell me, that doesn't really sound very good, I would honestly, I'd look at my track record and his, and I would be able to trust that, okay, this man knows what he's talking about, you know? And I think it's being able to recognize that, have that balance of self-respect, confidence, but also being willing to be open to critiques and getting better, obviously, as a musician, as an artist.
I find that humor helps a lot, you know, and kind of loosening people up and you know, relaxing them. And I will have brief conversations with them about, you know, studio and ego, and leaving your ego at the door. And that I tell them the same thing I said, is that we're working on this together. We want the same goal, you know, and it's never personal. Although I've worked with people, no matter that, I told them that, why do you have to talk to me like that? It's like, oh my God. Well, no, I'm not really talking to you any differently than I would talk to anyone else. And there's no malice in my tone, and there's no condescension, you know. It's just the ego of the person. It's hard for them to handle, because honestly, a lot of people who come into the studio think that they've been doing something entirely different than what they actually hear, you know, when it comes down to it. And so then the work begins of trying to get them to another place, you know. So many people, for instance, they get behind a microphone and they sing, and it's like okay. And I tell them, look, you know what, conspiratorial, right? Look, there's no one else here but you and I, all right? What I want you to do this time is I want you to go, like, kind of just go way out a little bit, you know, just kind of take it, you know, like to a place where you think is a little wild for you emotionally, and let's see what happens, all right? We can always dial it back, you know? It's like just you and me. And so then they go and I said, yeah, that's pretty good. How'd that feel? And they're like, good. I said, you know what? One more time. Now, this time go really, really crazy, okay? Just really emote it and really put it out there. And then they'll sing it again, and I go, that's exactly where you want to be. And for them, that's like being like crazy wild, like stepping out of themselves. And I tell people, singing is acting, you know? You can't get behind a microphone and be the same person you were when you stepped out of bed this morning. You have to step into a character and to get across your emotion, you know, in a way that people are going to get what you're doing. You can't just go in and, oh, today I love you, baby. You're so beautiful, you know. And so most people get that, and they understand that, and they'll grow into it. But a lot of people don't get that before they come in and realize just how closed they are or inhibited, you know. So that's a good way that always seems to help with people, and other than you know, humor and just trying to make people laugh. And
that's great. And I think, you know, of those successful writers who you know, they're always about being willing to start at point A and end at point B, and not let that first idea about what that song must be get in the way of what it actually needs to become. In that, you know, whether it's the production or whether it's the you know, be pre-production, the songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you know, not everyone is blessed with a voice, you know, and some songwriters shouldn't sing their own songs.
Mm-hmm.
Burt
Yeah.
Bacharach, don't sing your own songs. But what incredible songs he wrote, you know. Um, there's so many colors and variations, you know, and different ways of songwriting. But I tell you what, there's one consistency I think Keilani would probably agree with me, Keilana, and that is you need to stay in it, and you need to persevere and write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite those lyrics, you know, until you find the right expression. But I think one of the important things about songwriting when you first start to write a song is let it flow. Let that, it could be like complete garbage, you know, but you're getting a melody which is it's that it's rolling around your brain. You like the way it sounds and feels with the harmony, with the chords, and but the words, just like McCartney, scrambled eggs, oh my baby, how I love your legs, you know, which turned into yesterday, you know, yesterday, right? So, but he didn't have yesterday. He had scrambled eggs, and it's the same thing. It's just let it flow out, and don't try to write that perfect song like in one shot. It has to develop. It has to develop over time and write and rewrite and yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. In similarity to that, I think a big part about being a musician is being able to come to terms with you're gonna really suck in the beginning, and like to just like persevere through that for a bit, and don't let that embarrassment of like, oh my gosh, my first song like is trash. My first songs were trash. My first recordings of me singing and playing the guitar are, I cringe listening to them now 10 years later, but you know, we all start somewhere. And if you keep going and you just stick your head in and keep trying to, like, our crafts are like a blade, you know, you have to keep sharpening it. You can't stop. You have to continue to learn more or retrain yourself, because it is something that you can forget or get bad at if you don't do it and maintain it. So yeah, I agree with that.
Mm. One sure sign of your commitment to music and your love of music is no one has to tell you to practice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's right.
nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to switch gears here a little bit and talk about the industry for a little bit. You know, Keilana, that was an amazing moment when you won the 2021 Most Promising Artists, and I thought, you know, that must do something for you in terms of the industry. What has that been like since then, and maybe before then for you?
Yeah, if I can remember, I think, Jon, you were letting me know that you stumbled upon me because you brought your students, right, to the Blue Note for a songwriters round back
Right.
in like 2016.
Yep.
So the funny thing about that performance, I got asked to do that with a couple of my you know, my colleagues, and being up on a stage and sharing, yeah, Isaac, Tim Rose, and DeAndre Brackensick. So yeah, the four of us were on that stage. That was actually the first time I performed an original live to an audience. And so looking back on it, and to be able to say it was on the Blue Note stage is a pretty cool accomplishment now that I'm looking back at it. But yeah, I think the crazy thing was at that time I only had that one song, and I was only performing that song. It took me a while to even come to a point where I wanted to record that song. And so I started off recording in my own little self-production studio, mini studio that I have here in my home. And it took me, I think, about a year until I reached out to a producer. So I actually worked with Zale Music and Imo Garza on that first single. And it took 2 years for me. And that was such a great experience too, because again, that was my first time working with a producer, having to really seeing how, like, me, the lack of experience with communicating my ideas or my visions, because if you don't, as a songwriter or an artist, sometimes the producer will get really passionate about the project and will want to add on so many different things. And at one point, there was a point where we were recording that single and it didn't sound anything like what I envisioned. And it kind of lost motivation to keep going, because I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound like my song. And it really kind of discouraged me for a bit. But like you were saying, having that trust and that understanding that you're working together, it's a partnership, and being able to have that open conversation and let it know, like, hey, I really love all like this additional stuff that you added to it, but I really want it to be stripped back and get back to the heart of it, like just a guitar and a vocal and maybe some background vocals, nothing more. I don't want any crazy synths or, 808 kicks or whatever. And so thankfully we were able to pull it back, and then I felt confident with that song.
808
but
kicks, that's not Hawaii kicks, by the way. It's like
yeah,
a rolling drum machine. But go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And so because the song that I had was like an R&B neo soul vibe track, and so I really wanted it more stripped down. But eventually we got to the point where I felt comfortable with it, and I finally released it out into the world. And I was very, very surprised with the receivement that I got from my listeners here in Hawaii, but also outside. And that's really what encouraged me to keep going with writing. So I continued writing the rest of my album, which was the album that I won last year with R&B album. But it took me years. It took me about 4 to 5 years to finish a good compilation of songs that I felt proud of. But those weren't just the songs I took from a good pile of songs. I was like, okay, this is gonna be my first project. What do I want do I want it to share with the world? And I was really proud of it. And now we're here. What was it, 2016? So I really suck at math. But I'm a musician, so that doesn't make sense. So about 6 years.
Yeah,
6 years, later.
That's an interesting thought that you say, because a lot of like the big groups back in the day, they call them overnight successes because they pop out into the scene and they were huge, and they had these killer songs on their albums, whether it was Journey or who else? Aerosmith, maybe, or any number of groups, but they call them overnight successes. No, they had recorded 2 albums before that, and they had been, for 10 years, they had been touring and on the road and writing songs. And so that was the culmination of what you heard that they did in 10 years, which made it so hard to follow up for these guys. Because how do you do in a year or two what you just did in 10 years, following your great success? Yeah, that's a really difficult thing. The other thing about production, about what you need in your song and what you don't need. There's a lot of different schools. There's a lot of different schools of thought. There's a lot of different styles of production that some producers, they like to, have a lot of things going on, and other producers like to be more sparse, and get into the song. But it's good that you knew what you wanted, and that you knew that it wasn't about having all of this stuff, because you wanted to hear the essence of the song. And depending on the style of music you're doing, some things you need to have a lot of things going on, but hearing the essence of the song and having just the right things, 3 or 4 or 5 things complementing each other going on, can really make the song, pop out, rather than obscuring it with too many things. I don't want to take up too much time, but I have this great analogy for that too. I was watching Gordon Ramsay on Kitchen Nightmares,
Yeah.
He was in Britain, actually, at this French restaurant, and there were these 3 French chefs, and these guys were awesome. What they wanted to get was their Michelin star, so they invited him to come and sample their food, and so they brought out things to him, and it was exquisite, these things that they made, and these guys are really top of the line, top-notch professionals. So they brought out their signature dish to him, and he ate it, and his comment to them was, I like this, but there's so many flavors on it, I can't really tell what the main dish is. And all of them are delicious, and all of them are good. And the French chefs are like, who are you to say is that we have? So he brought in a retired Michelin judge, right? A retired Michelin judge. And Ramsay cooked the same dish that they cooked. And so they gave it to the judge for him to give his comments. And wouldn't you know, lo and behold, he said exactly the same thing, that he couldn't get to the essence of what the dish was because there were so many flavors and things around. And I think that's a great analogy for producing music, where you
That
can have
is.
the most beautiful sounds and oh, that's lovely, and this is beautiful and that's lovely. But if you're obscuring the song and you're not hearing it, then what does it matter, you know?
Right.
So
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm so sorry, I don't think I even really answered the question.
yeah,
But if I would say this industry definitely is changing, I would say social media technology not only has allowed for, better technologies for recording, but even just for putting the word out there. And I feel like this day and age, artists or creators can wear many hats. It's not just a producer or a songwriter or an engineer. On top of being an artist, you kind of record deals are kind of slowly becoming a thing of the past, I feel, for in my opinion, because there's a lot of indie artists nowadays that just need to maintain their followings on social media and they can sell out stadiums as much as a record labeled artist. And so it's really the doors have been kicked open, and I think it just really takes a lot of dedication and focus now, especially if you want to make it in this industry. You have to either be really, really good at one thing or dabble in a little bit of everything in order to be able to sustain yourself and thrive in the industry.
yeah, it's true.
You know,
Go ahead, John.
yeah, no. I was just gonna say, Keilana, you spent some time at Mele, and I want to give a shout out to those guys, John Vieira, Eric Lagrimas, John Ross. Yeah, what did you take away from that experience? Because you had classical voice, and
Right.
yet you're a pop singer, and you're or you're a R&B singer. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, no, definitely. Because so I graduated from Kamehameha schools in 2012, and my goal was to go back to that school and be the choir director. I wanted to teach choir because I fell in love with that. And so I studied at UH Manoa and I got my bachelor's degree there, and I was going to do education. But for some reason, I kind of wanted to finish as quickly as I could. So I did the 4-year track in general music, but I got to dabble in everything. Of course, we had to take piano lessons. I got vocal pedagogy. So I really was able to understand how my voice works, how to maintain it, how to take care of it. I also finally dabbled in music theory and oral training because that was something I lacked. I just had an ear, but finally being able to understand the logic of it all. It also helped me discover that I have perfect pitch. So that's been able to help me with recognizing music and tones and figuring out songs on the spot, which concurrently with studying at UH Manoa, I was trying to be a gigging artist. And so I was doing the solo singer-songwriter thing. And one thing that I recognized from studying at UH Manoa and what compelled me to go to HCC was the desire to learn more about the business and recording. And so that's one thing I really, really appreciate about Honolulu Community College's Mele program, is because there are those 2 tracks, the Mele business, music business, and the audio engineering track. And so at one point, the first year, you learn a little bit of both. You have a taste of both. And I actually really, really loved learning about audio engineering. And a part of me kind of wanted to go down that route. But the only thing about that was, in order to be an audio engineer major, you would have to sacrifice your nights, and that's when I was gigging. So I was like, okay, I'm going to just stay in the business route, but still trying to maintain and understand and learn on my own. But with that, it really, really helped. And I think, honestly, I can credit that to my success now, is all of that education. So mahalo to the University of Hawaiʻi for having all of these resources for people like me.
Yeah, that's terrific. Dave, you've been active since the 80s, and you've seen
and have recorded the greats. That I just need to say that out loud. Like it is insane to me that I'm on this call with you right now.
I like to describe my job as I make such good friends doing what I do, and every once in a while we make some good music. It's like, what a job.
and yet everything is like changing, right? And you said back then, you know, the technology was changing quickly. It's changing quickly now. So what I think in you know, I think one of the burning questions that I've had is just, you know, what is I guess gosh, well, there are two burning questions. One is just about the pandemic, right? It's just, you know, how has that affected your work, and what does that mean for the future of what you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the thick of the pandemic, I didn't see anybody. Yeah, there was no close contact. There was no sessions. I mean, basically, I'm putting people in a room and they're taking their mask off and they're singing, right? And they're filling up the room with whatever. So when people would leave, I'd have to disinfect, you know, everything, the microphone and the door handles. I'd go in with my mask on and open up the window and hope that you know, it would be blown out, and I can get rid of anything bad that might be in the air. So that happened though only after the numbers were down enough and people were willing enough to come in. You know, some people would contact me, or I'd contact them and say, yeah, you know, it's okay, this is how I'm going to do it. But it was very limited. It was very limited because of that. And now I would say in the last, really just the last couple of months, with the restrictions going down, and it looks like this particular strain of COVID is going away, that more people are coming out of, let's call it musical hibernation, and they want to come in and resume their projects. I still have 4 or 5 people or more that haven't contacted me yet, you know, to come back in. I don't know if they want to continue their project, if they've stopped it, if they're still leery about coming into the studio in a closed environment. I'm not quite sure. Could be any number of reasons. Maybe they've gotten out of music completely, and you know, they're traveling around the world. Who knows? But the impact was great, and of course it's a trickle down effect. If live musicians are not gigging, then they're not making any money, and they don't have any money to record and come in and do that kind of a thing. So it was system wide, the effects of the pandemic on, I think, everyone. And I'm happy to see a lot of my friends out playing again and doing gigs, and some of them are really quite busy. I'm very happy for them. But that was brutal. Yeah.
That was big for sure.
Brutal,
Yeah.
to say the least. So yeah, I mean, that was the major thing about recording, is they said the worst thing you can possibly do, which is why they didn't want people gigging, is having someone out in the middle of a room opening their mouth, going ah, and putting out germs into the air. So that was something that we had to deal with for a while. And you know, people, it's interesting that people would still come into the studio, and when I would remember to ask them, I'm like, you're vaccinated, right? And some people were like, well, no. And I'm like, well, you know what, we can't really record. You know, it's that same thing about being in an enclosed space where the air just stays there. I had to have some sort of confidence that there wasn't going to be any germs there that I didn't want. So that was, you know, part of the problem with trying to work and record during the pandemic. Difficult.
Yeah. How about you, Keilana?
It definitely took some adjusting because I was a gigging musician, like you said, and I was doing that 5 nights a week. So to go from 5 to absolutely nothing, it really put a toll on my mental health for a bit. But something in me kind of told me, okay, maybe we should get on this new wave. I had done live streaming, you know, on social media once or twice pre-pandemic, but something told me to invest in a lot of the equipment. And so I made it a point to get the, you know, the interface, the digital interfaces to be able to connect to my phone, to my mixing board, and to all these different things. And I somehow found a way to actually grow my following and my audience through the pandemic. So in a lot of weird ways, the pandemic really, really sucked, because it really took away that connection, physical connection to an audience, being able to play in an establishment. But coming out of it, man, it felt so good to be in front of an audience again, once everything kind of slowly started coming back. But at the same time too, I do have to say, it really helped me determine how serious I am about this. Was this like, this is pretty much like a life or death thing. Like, am I going to still continue to try and do music despite this unknown of if we're ever going to be able to be together again, and the sickness? But I really discovered that I love this so much, and I love the connection that I'm able to foster with people. And yeah, so it kind of opened some doors for me too, I'm not going to lie, but it was tough. But it made me really become a better musician, because I had so much downtime. So I was learning a lot more songs and chords and all kinds of things. I was writing a lot. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So, yeah, you know, the changes that the pandemic brought, are we looking at a changed industry because of the pandemic? And I mean, what does the future look like?
I mean, I don't know, because, you know, for a really long time during this pandemic, as a gigging musician, we had to fight to be able to be in establishments. And then we had to have like the plexiglass in front of our faces, which was so weird. It felt like a gorilla behind a cage for a really long time. But yeah, I think you just, I don't know, really, you never know. And I'm just going to have to roll with the punches when it comes. But I think now there really is an avenue for live streaming, which is something that I wasn't familiar with before this. But there are some people that, you know, put concerts on completely remote, and people watch and make some money from that. So it's really interesting. But yeah, I would say that's something that evolved from this, mm-hmm. is that avenue for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's going to take a while, you know, for things to come back to normal in all aspects of our lives, you know. Music too. And what the fallout is going to be, I'm not sure, of people who have reevaluated their lives and found that music is not as important to them, or it's more than ever, you know, it's important to them, or you know, it remains to be seen.
Mm. Yeah. Well, thanks to you both. I just have one more, you know, small. Yeah, I know. I have one more, and that is just what advice would you give for an up and coming, someone who wants to be a producer, or someone who wants to be a songwriter?
I would love to hear Dave first, so that I can take in this knowledge, actually.
Well, for a producer, you want to be a producer, I think you have to be a musician. You have to. Back in the day, major record labels just had they had staff producers, you know, they'd assign to projects, and they'd just go in and they'd be producers. And I worked with a couple of guys once, and it's like, can you do something else? And you know, like, all right, you got any ideas? You know, well, no, just not that. Okay, but do that, something like that, only better, or whatever it might be, you know. So being, as I said earlier, being a musician and being able to speak that language, and especially if you know the instrument of the person that you're talking with. I mean, I went as far as taking a semester of flute lessons and a semester of violin lessons when I was in college. And you know, I wanted to learn. Of course, I took advanced 300-400 level classes in orchestration and analysis and things like that. I wanted to be able to speak to, you know, horn players and string players and stuff, which I've had many occasions to do since. about the expression of the parts that they were playing. And as a producer, you have to know that stuff. If you don't record it all the time, then you have to go and listen to it. And it's not to say that you have to become an expert on classical music or jazz or horns, but you just have to have a good, broad, overall knowledge of music and different styles. I listen to all kinds of stuff. I listen to country, I listen to rap, I listen to R&B, I listen to KTUH is one of my favorite stations because they play so many different things. And believe it or not, now, even at my age, I love to hear new things and like, there was there's been a few things that I've actually went and dialed in, KTUH to see who it was and what it was that I was listening to when I was driving in my car, because I had to know. But yeah, there's always there's infinite possibilities as to what you can learn. I always learn something new as a producer too. I'm always learning new things about music. And one of the most valuable things I think that happens during the process of producing with someone is somebody makes a mistake or doesn't sing it the way that you thought, you're asking them to sing it, or they play something different. It's like, wait, what was that? And then we, rewind it and we'll play it back, and it's like that's it. That's it. That is the art, and you have to have an open mind when you're working with people to not be so locked into something that has to be this way. We're trying to get this kind of execution. If something different happens, make sure that you're open-minded enough to recognize that could be something better than the other thing would ever be. And it wasn't even a mistake. Sometimes there's mistakes that happen like that, but other things that just, wow, that was really something, and let's try to develop that or take that. Or working with artists and people when you say, hey, you know what, I really like that. How about if you tried something like this? And then they go, and then they do it, and they go, whoa, how about something like this? And in that process of collaboration, you get to something that you wouldn't if you worked by yourself, or if it just stopped there, where you're actually feeding each other ideas, and you're growing off of that initial idea to say, yeah, that's something that's better than we could have ever done by ourselves. So for producing, I think all of those things are important. Understanding music and being a musician will really help a lot. And just having a good attitude, when you work with people, and being respectful, keeping things light, so people feel comfortable and can do what they need to do, and just trying to make things then as good as they can be.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dave. Keilana.
I think Dave hit it right on the nail. If there's anything that I could emphasize from that, is definitely, if you want to do music, you should know music. And the only way to know music is to understand the different aspects of it. And sorry, that's me.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's me. They can wait. But yeah, really never stop learning. I think the greats that we all look at and aspire to be like, they're the best because they never believe that they're the best. There's always that room for improvement. And I think having an open mind is so important and so crucial, because like I said, I went to study music thinking I was going to be a choral director, and then I studied opera. And at first I'm like, what the heck, how am I ever going to use opera in anything? But it's such a, I use it in my day-to-day life now. And so really take advantage of education, take advantage of all the resources that are now available and the many growing resources. And if you are in the industry now, I think it's so important to speak up about what's out there or what people don't know, because a lot of people just don't know. And, here we all are, showing that we can be happy, successful, and create really awesome things from a thing we all enjoy. So yeah, never stop learning, be open, and don't ever think you've made it, because you'll find out that, you can go further if you, yeah.
And remember John Lennon's all you need is love. There's nothing you can sing that can't be sung. There's nothing you can do that can't be done. Never ever think that you have reached the pinnacle and the top, because when you do, then it's time to stop and go into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it never ends.
Agreed.
For,
exactly.
For excellence and knowledge. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Dave Tucciarone, Keilana, Mokulehua. So awesome. Thank you so much for honoring our festival with these words of wisdom.
Thank you.
My pleasure, John.
It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Take care.
Mahalo. Thank you for listening.
Aloha.